Hello readers, I'm Amy. Welcome back to the channel. I thought today we would do a if you watched this then you should read this kind of thing. It sounded fun. I've got a list of movies here. I think we've got a pretty good selection. Like, I've got an animated movie, I've got some murder mystery movies, a little bit of horror, some comedy, so I think I've got like a decent variety going on here. Hopefully you'll agree with some of these, or you'll check out some of these books, or check out some of these movies slash documentaries. Yeah, so that's the idea. I want to start with the one that actually inspired this, and I've seen this movie a couple of times. Apparently a lot of people actually haven't seen it or heard of it though, but Brendan Fraser is coming back, if you haven't all heard yet. The sweet hottie from the Mummy movies who just got all of our hearts pumping. He's back into acting, and I actually am a really big fan of one of his older movies, Bedazzled. Again, I feel like a lot of people haven't actually watched this, but basically this bumbling guy comes across the devil and doesn't totally understand that she's the devil, but she's like, hey, I will give you whatever you want, just tell me what you want. And he's like going after this girl, of course, so he wants to be with her, and throughout the whole movie he's saying like, I want to be with this woman and be happy and like be married to her, and each time he makes a wish the devil finds a way to screw it up. And it's just, it's really funny. It's one of those Satan make a wish, watch what happens movies. Brendan Fraser is amazing as usual. And for this book, or for this movie, the book that I want to recommend, actually it was gifted to me by Hillary from Melted Books, and I got it and started reading it at the same time as the last time I watched this movie, so the timing was just right there. And whenever I was watching this movie I was thinking, wow, this book like could really go along with this. And that is Sign Here by Claudia Lux, which we're following, not Satan, but we're following like an employee of hell who basically, as an employee, you're trying to collect larger and larger generations of families, and he's got a few generations of this one family and he's working on the new generation. So we kind of go back and forth between his job and his life with his coworkers, how he relates to those coworkers, watching him try and collect the souls of this family, and we're also seeing their dynamic. So both of these movies just have this really good dynamic going on of looking at the main character, looking at how hell operates, and just kind of having fun with it, having some twists and turns in there. So would highly recommend pairing this movie with this book. I feel like I'm recommending like Foods and Fine Wines or something. So then we have Children of the Corn, which I think I've watched this, or at least I've watched most of it. But like the original Stephen King adaptation of the movie Children of the Corn. The book that I would recommend to go with this is Suffer the Children by Craig DeLuey. So with Children of the Corn, I haven't read the story, but you have like, I think it's these kids who are basically killing their parents, has something to do with a cornfield. Forgive me for not remembering a lot of this. I got out of surgery a couple of days ago and I already struggle to remember some plots and names with books, like many of us who read as many books as we do. But Children of the Corn, and then Suffer the Children, it wasn't exactly my style of book. Like, I had a good time with it. It was a bit much emotionally from time to time, but you have these kids, all of these kids just kind of start dying and no one can figure out why, and then they come back to life and the parents like, oh great, they're back to life, and then they realize that they're having to give their blood to these kids, kind of vampires, and they basically keep getting sick or dying if they haven't had blood for a little bit. And the town is like running out of blood, and blood is becoming a really valuable commodity because these parents are just trying to keep these kids alive. There is a lot going on with that emotionally, but if you like horror and creepy children in horror, then these two I think would pair really nicely and would recommend. I might try reading more Craig DeLuey. Like, Stuff for the Children was almost a little bit much for me. It was a little on the edge of what I read, but it was also so well done that I can see myself reading more of him in the future if I'm in the mood. I definitely do better with stronger content like that when it's a book versus a movie, I think, but my tastes are changing a lot in both aspects. So next up, this one is very sensitive content, so I'll warn you ahead of time. But apparently a lot of people have actually watched this. Keep Sweet. It's a documentary on Netflix. It is about the, what is it called? FLDS? Church? I can't remember what the acronym is. But Keep Sweet is about the people of it's like the Zion Church that moved from Utah to Texas. If you cannot handle documentaries on abuse, specifically surrounding sexual abuse and children, then do not watch this. There are some audio clips that are really hard to hear, even as someone who generally does okay with those kind of documentaries. So very strong content, but also very important content. And then I've also been watching, her name's Elise. I cannot remember her last name, but she did a series of podcast episodes with someone talking about her experience in this cult as a child bride, as someone in an abusive relationship, trying to escape the cult. If you want to watch the podcast on YouTube, I'll have to look it up. I'll put up an image or put a link down below. But I think I feel like the podcast was easier to watch and to listen to than the documentary, because you're just getting the one perspective from someone who, while she was a child bride, she was much older than a lot of the child brides in the documentary, so the content's just a little bit easier to ease into. But it was, I think, a very well done documentary. If you're interested in cults, could potentially recommend that. Just be very wary of trigger warnings with that. But kind of in the spectrum of cults, but not as sensitive with the content, we have Cultish by Amanda Montell. I loved this book. I initially buddy read it with Hillary from Melted Books, as I usually do with my buddy reads. And we listened to the first half, and then she went on vacation, so we took a break before listening to the second half, and then I re-listened to the first half. So I really should have just re-listened to the second half, and I could have counted it as another book for last year. Last year? The year before. At some point. I think it was last year. Anyways, Cultish by Amanda Montell. It's the language of fanaticism. It goes a lot into talking about cults, specifically the language of cults. We're not just talking about NXIVM and, God, I cannot think of names today. Again, this is like surgery brain. I'm doing especially bad with remembering names of things. Anyways, it talks about the big cults and the history of those cults. It talks about Scientology and some people that she knows. I think there's a friend in her childhood who'd taken some of the initial tests to get into the Scientology church, just thinking it was a personality test because that's what they sell it to you as. And then there's CrossFit, which isn't what you think of as cults. I don't know that it's particularly abusive, but they use some of those same language techniques as are used in cults to make you feel special and part of the group, or make you feel bad if you don't meet certain goals. So it's just a really awesome look at the language of that. So if you like Keep Sweet the documentary, or are generally interested in cult documentaries, highly recommend reading Cultish. Also for nonfiction, nonfictions can be tricky to recommend because a lot of them are very dryly written and can be difficult to get into, but Cultish was one of those really accessible, engaging nonfiction books, which is another reason why I really love to recommend it. Then we have another horror movie, The Exorcist. Now I want to say right off, I have never watched this movie the whole way through. It goes one of two ways for me whenever I try to watch it. Either I've watched the beginning of the original, which ends up freaking me out so much that I can't get through the movie, which the last time I started watching the original, I was, I think, in high school. Gotten better with horror movies since then. But since high school. The only version of The Exorcist that I've been able to find is the cut version, which you either get the extreme original version that has everything and is a lot, or you find the cut version which cuts out absolutely everything interesting, and then it's just an incredibly boring movie. They should have made a cut in between. But anyways, if you are an Exorcist fan, I would recommend A Head Full of Ghosts. I didn't write down the author here. I can't remember the author name. But A Head Full of Ghosts, neither of these are totally to my taste. And typically speaking, I'm not really a paranormal exorcism story kind of person. But A Head Full of Ghosts, I really liked the concept. So in The Exorcist, you have, I believe it's an actress and her daughter living in this house, and the daughter gets possessed. And you're just kind of watching this demon take possession of her and all these horrible things happening. Now in A Head Full of Ghosts, it takes that similar acting concept, and we have this family where this girl may or may not be possessed by a demon. We're not really sure. And in order to make money, because they're like really low on money and they're dealing with all this shit from their daughter possibly being possessed, they actually end up getting a hold of this TV company somehow who makes a reality show around the daughter who's possibly possessed. And then we get a little bit of back and forth from a blog being written in the future talking about the single season of this reality show that was made. So it's a really cool examination of the exorcism genre and of like reality TV genres and medias and how they're used whenever it comes to like hauntings and stuff. So I think those two would pair really well. You've got like the most famous exorcism movie ever and then a book examining the exorcism genre. I just think they would go together really well. Now, this next one is going to be super controversial because this book is very popular. I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing it talked about everywhere. And I have a very unpopular opinion. So my next recommendation, if you are a fan of Heathers or The Craft, I would recommend reading Bunny by Mona Awad. Now, before I dive into that, let me say, I have watched The Craft a couple of times and I enjoy it. I have watched Heathers a couple of times, and I thought it was interesting enough the first time around whenever I was, I think, early college, whenever I first read that book, or watched that movie. The last time I tried to watch Heathers was a couple of weeks ago, and I was really bored, and the acting wasn't really there for me, and I didn't enjoy it. I picked up Bunny by Mona Awad a couple of weeks ago. I did not finish it. I hated it. I think that the writing is pretentious, I thought the characters were pretentious, and I put down the book once the guy started talking about being in a mermaid limo and not touching himself to the memory of it. And I'm just like, what does this have to do with anything? Like, that whole conversation was so unhinged, and not one sentence in that conversation related to another sentence, and I hated it. And I'm not going to listen to anyone's opinions on this book, honestly, because I'm that upset that I wasted my time on this book. I actually did it as a buddy read, and my friend, I think, really enjoyed it, but I'm like, no. I hear a lot of this book was so weird, and what was that, and the ending is totally worth it. For me, the end of a book does not necessarily justify the beginning. If I didn't enjoy the journey, I'm not really going to care about the end, because I shouldn't have to get through 150 pages of garbage to read 10 pages of gold. That's not my reading style. But anyways, now that the unpopular opinion is out of the way, Heathers and The Craft kind of have that culty undertone. You've got like the witchy bad vibes to it, and that's kind of what Bunny is. You have this weird cult of girls who call themselves bunnies, and they're doing magic against people, and it's both of those movies come off to me as pretty literary. Specifically, Heathers has kind of a literary feel where there's these, I think there's these hidden messages that you're supposed to be getting, And that's the other thing with Bunny, is it is very pretentious, but it's also very literary in its writing, and that is not a writing style that I am particularly enamored by. It's not a genre that I really get into, so it also doesn't really surprise me that I disliked Bunny as much as I did, because it's just not my genre. But with the movies and the book both being kind of literary, being kind of cultish, focusing around the bad vibes you get from these girl groups, I think they would pair really well together. Then murder mystery. I loved Adam Sandler movies as a kid. As an adult, I didn't like Adam Sandler movies, and I thought he was going too far with it, and I was getting sick and tired of seeing the same storylines over and over again. And then he came out with the murder mystery movies with Jennifer Aniston, and I love them. They're just a really good time. The second movie was amazing, just like the first movie was amazing. And for this one, we're going with more of a comedy and murder bent here, and I'm going to recommend Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I wasn't as big of a fan of the second book, which focuses on a main character's wedding, but the first book was just a good time. Like, you have these crazy Asian aunties who have their own ideas of the world, as many older people do, and they clash with the youth's ideas of the world, as they often do. And they're wedding planners, and there's this murder that happens, and they're trying to cover it up. And in Murder Mystery, the movies, they're trying to like solve the murder, but both of them are, they're murder mysteries, and they include comedy, and you've got these really amazing group dynamics going on. And if you like murder but also like having a good time, would recommend both of these. Not that you like murdering people, but if you like murder content, please don't murder people. Just saying. Two more on this list. I have Malevolent, which I keep saying Malignant because Malignant is the movie that I keep seeing come up on... Is it on Hulu or is it on Netflix? That Malignant keeps coming up. And I don't think I enjoyed that movie very much, but I have a thing for Florence Pugh. I'm not going to start on that because we could be here for hours. She's a beautiful, sexy acting genius, and I'm trying to watch most of her movies. Not all of them, but most of them. And I came across Malevolent, which is her haunted house movie, and had such a good time. It's got some great twists and turns. It's a dark haunted house movie, which haunted houses historically have been very tricky content. Sometimes they work for me as movies, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they work for me as books, sometimes they don't. But I really thoroughly enjoyed this haunted house movie, and for that I'm going to recommend The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn, which is her novella. And both of these, the movie and the book, follow not a psychic, because Florence Pugh isn't a psychic, but they both have very spiritual aspects to the characters, but they're like fake spiritualists. And then you have this very real thing that occurs, and the clash between thinking everything is fake and then trying to figure out what's real and what's fake. So in the movie, you have sibling ghost hunters, and the main character, is she a medium? It's been a little bit since I've seen it. But she's supposed to be like a fake medium, but turns out she's actually a real medium and can actually speak to ghosts. And they go to this haunted house and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with it. And in The Grown Up, it's been a while since I've read it, but you have this psychic who's like a fake psychic, and then this very real stuff happening. So again, they have that same kind of general storyline and take it in different directions, and I think that their mood very much is similar between the two. And last one, we're gonna go with a fun little animated movie here, the Hotel Transylvania movies. I don't know if there's 3 of them. I want to say there's 3 of them now. I've only watched the first 2, which I wasn't expecting to love them as much as I did. But Hotel Transylvania, you're following this vampire family, and they're owners of this hotel, and they go on adventures. For this, I want to recommend The Radleys by Matt Haig. I have thoroughly enjoyed everything I've read by him. I think there's just 1 or 2 books of his that I haven't read. One of them is like a timeline sort of book, which doesn't tend to be something I reach for. But The Radleys is about a couple of vampire teenagers whose parents are vampires, so they were born vampires. But as teenagers, they haven't had that conversation yet with their parents, and they don't know that they are vampires. So you've got two different vampire families who are trying to figure out their lives and how to move forward with their lives and find happiness in who they are. And I think that they would go really well together if you like some light, fun vampire content. So that was my much longer list than I thought it would be of movies and books that I think go well together. So if you've watched these movies, you should read these books, or vice versa. If you watched and enjoyed them. Like, if you didn't enjoy them, then don't read the books that I'm pairing them with, obviously. That is going to be it for me. Please let me know down below if you agree with my choices, and let me know if you've watched Bedazzled, because I want to talk to more people who have watched that movie. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I will catch all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.